In today's video, we'll be diving into the magical and turfy mind of J.K. Rowling, who brought us magical things such as butterbeer, hippogriffs, and internalized transphobia. But is she really a TERF? This YouTuber seems to think so. As always, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like and a comment. And lots of you watching aren't subscribed, as shown by this nifty graph thing. So there's a big red subscribe button below this video. You know what to do. Click it.
Gender is a universe.
All white people benefit from racism.
The health problems I have are more age-related than weight-related.
You are a white privileged male.
That's just obnoxious.
Peter
Sorry,
Lloyd,
you have to give me a chance to respond to that.
And we don't.
I'm just going to dive straight in and say JK Rowling and transphobia is not something that is new to this channel, but it's always something I've taken a more neutral approach to because, to be honest, I've never been completely sure if she's truly like anti-trans or if maybe she's just been a bit misinformed and misguided in her approach to some things on trans matters. She supported Maya Forstater. This is something I've also spoken about in a video, and Maya is a lady who was being transphobic in her place of work and felt wronged for being fired for that behaviour. JK Rowling has also liked anti-trans tweets in the past, but when there was backlash to this, she had a representative state that she had a, I'm quoting this, clumsy and middle-aged moment. Well, I'm pretty sure there are no excuses that can be made by or for her this time, as JK Rowling has directly written transphobic tweets from her account. It's not just liking, it's not just supporting somebody, literally just full-on anti-trans tweets. The cherry on this transphobic and rather turfy hat trick.
Besides, you're saying it wrong. It's transphobia, not defending biological sex. Well, by now I think we're all aware of the drama surrounding J.K. Rowling based on this article which was published by Global News stating that opinion, creating a more equal post-COVID-19 world for people who menstruate. I've always had trouble saying that word. Well, that seemed to trigger J.K. Rowling. He tweeted that people who menstruate. I'm sure there used to be a word for those people. Someone help me out. Woman? Wimpund? Woomud? Before also going on to say, if sex isn't real, there's no same-sex attraction. If sex isn't real, the lived reality of women globally is erased. I know and love trans people, but erasing the concept of sex removes the ability of many to meaningfully discuss their lives. It isn't hate to speak the truth. Aww. She perhaps should have thought more carefully before publishing this to Twitter, of all places.
As yesterday, she posted these tweets. Just gonna leave them there for a minute, let you maybe read them. You could pause the video if you wanted to read them fully. They'll be back later, don't worry. It's like she'd initially been testing the waters with her anti-transness, like a kid pressing the buttons to see how far they could go before they got in trouble. But no, not anymore. She's just gone full out this time, no holding back. Like, she's just let us know her views. I wanted to talk to you about why what she tweeted recently was transphobic and why it's so hurtful to the trans community, the partners of trans people, friends, family, supporters of the trans community, why it is just hurtful to transness in general. Some people might see me, a trans man, and say that due to the likelihood that my chromosomes are XX, not that I know or anybody else knows.
Say it with me. Say it with me. Say it with me. This is a stupid argument. This is a weak argument. Stop using this argument. I haven't had my chromosomes tested either, but my excessive body hair, beard, low voice and tangly bits between my thighs point very heavily to the scientific fact that I am a male and therefore have XY chromosomes. I can say with 100% certainty that my chromosomes are XY. Various scientific articles will state that chromosomal abnormalities aren't as uncommon as you think, leading you to believe that you shouldn't assume someone's gender because you don't know what their chromosomes are, such as this article that was published by the Globe and Mail, written by Peter Knight, a professor who works in the School of Criminology. Can you feel the science?
That my sex is female. I'm just going to go through some points quickly about why this rhetoric is transphobic and quite frankly flawed. Chromosomes aren't always XX and XY, and they don't always match up with the typical biological sex that you would expect them to, or that many people would expect them to. Intersex people are a very real thing. Records of legal sex can be changed, just like records of gender identity. My legal sex is male, my birth certificate says male, and that's important. And why the hell does it matter? Trans men and trans women are not trying to say, look at me, I'm cisgender. We're not trying to hide our journeys. We just want to live our lives as the gender we know we are. So transphobes splitting hairs on this outdated and exclusive terminology is quite frankly getting very boring. As I said, no one is trying to say that sex isn't real, but making sex the be-all and end-all of experiences and who people are erases the lives and experiences of trans people, and that is invalidating. Another thing J.K. Rowling mentioned is same-sex attraction, and same-sex attraction is a term used by many anti-trans people as another way to invalidate trans people.
In this article published by Slate, the website writes that we know that Rowling's ideas about trans men are not based in a careful examination of the research, because the research we have, though spotty and admittedly insufficient, tends, that's very, very conditional, to lead toward the conclusion that desistance rates are reducing and female-assigned youth are less likely to desist than male-assigned youth are. So where does this fear that young women are falsely identifying as trans men in large numbers and will one day be filled with regret come from? Simply put, it comes from the sexist beliefs reverberating in the TERF echo chambers that Rowling seems to have immersed herself in. TERFs believe that trans men are women, that they are victims of trans ideology, and that any day now a cleansing wave of detransitioning trans men will sweep through the population. Rather than giving women the agency or the ability to know their own minds, they explain trans men by relying on a narrative of victimhood that resonates with the victimhood they feel all women experience at the hands of men and trans women. Not only are women not safe in sharing bathrooms with trans women, they can't even be safe from trans women's influence over their own minds.
And you know what? There is far more to people and gender and attraction than the genitals you were born with and the chromosomes that you cannot see. I don't know about you, but I've never seen somebody and gone, ooh, that's a beautiful set of chromosomes you've got there. The alternative and correct way forward is to base attraction on gender. It's an inclusive term that does not mean you have to find trans people attractive.
I mean, this isn't directly related to the video, but I found this amazing infographic that was on transstudent.org, designed by Landon Pan and Anna Moore, called the Gender Unicorn. Apparently we use a unicorn now because before they used a man or a woman, and that was perhaps slightly too turfy. So then they replaced it with a gingerbread person, because we don't say gingerbread man anymore. And I think then the gingerbread person was replaced by a unicorn to better express the entire spectrum of gender. Yeah, I think that's it. Or, you know, just like unicorns, the entire spectrum of gender is a magical universe which doesn't really exist. I'll just leave this image here. Feel free to pause the video and educate yourselves, you bigots.
It just recognises that genitals and chromosomes are not the only important things when it comes to attraction, because it recognises the role that gender plays and accommodates trans people and our validity. Secondly, all the trans people I know, and I would bet you all the money in Gringotts that I know more trans people than J.K. Rowling. All the trans people I know definitely do not love her. And there's a big old but in her tweet that we really need to talk about. J.K. Rowling says, I love trans people, but... And we all know what follows a but, don't we? She's clearly just throwing that in there to keep a tiny little fingernail grip on the see-through veil of her not being anti-trans. You can't love trans people and then invalidate and shit on them to your 14 million followers in the same tweet. That's like saying I love biscuits, but biscuits don't exist and biscuits aren't really food and they don't deserve to be recognised as food. I'm sorry, what?
Of course, there were other online publications which sought to cancel J.K. Rowling for her turfy views, including Vulture that wrote, which brings us to Rowling's 5 reasons for being worried about the new trans activism. A quick rundown. And the first point is a quote from J.K. Rowling where she says, I have a charitable trust that focuses on alleviating social deprivation in Scotland, with a particular emphasis on women and children, Rowling writes, adding that she worries the acceptance of transgender people will erode the legal definition of sex and replace it with gender. Scientists and scholars, of course, maintain that sex and gender are two different, both important things. Well, if you click on the link provided where they refer to scientists and scholars who maintain that sex and gender are two different things, it takes you to Planned Parenthood, which tells us that sex is a label, male or female, that you're assigned by a doctor at birth, and gender is much more complex.
The next thing she tweeted truly baffled me. And this one was a sharing of an article about COVID and menstruation, and what J.K. Rowling had to say about this one was the following. People who menstruate. I'm sure there used to be a word for those people. Someone help me out. Womban? Wimpand? Woomud? Woomud. If you don't get it, J.K. Rowling is trying to be highly patronising by pretending to have forgotten the word woman when reading an article that uses the word people. Well, I am not a womban, wimpud, woomud, or even a woman. And I used to menstruate. So yes, JK, people who menstruate is the right term to use. Some women menstruate, some don't. Some men menstruate, some don't. And some non-binary people menstruate, and some don't. But having a title like men, women, and non-binary people who menstruate is a little bit long-winded, which is why it's easier to just shorten it down to people who menstruate. Because it is not just women.
With everything going on in the world right now, from the sickness to the economy slowly crumbling away before our eyes, you're not even allowed to state a scientific fact unless you're a fan of being cancelled, which is the term everyone is using, or facing a barrage of hate in Twitterland. The whole point of transitioning relies on the basis that you are transitioning from one sex to another to better align your physical state with what you feel mentally, but apparently pointing out that biological sex exists is bad and evil. Ryan Anderson for Heritage writes that at the core of the ideology is the radical claim that feelings determine reality. From this idea come extreme demands for society to play along with subjective reality claims. Trans ideologues ignore contrary evidence and competing interests. They disparage alternative practices, and they aim to muffle skeptical voices and shut down any disagreement. The movement has to keep patching and shoring up its beliefs, policing the faithful, coercing the heretics, and punishing apostates. Oof, I'm aroused. Because as soon as its furious efforts flag for a moment or someone successfully stands up to it, the whole charade is exposed. That's what happens when your dogmas are so contrary to obvious basic everyday truths. Well, if you enjoyed this video, then why not watch my previous video here? Or you can click here to access the complete playlist that will tickle your senses and arouse you for hours.